Welcome to Tomorrow Unveiled. I'm strapping you in today for a look at the future that is quite literally attaching itself to our bodies, our faces, and maybe even our minds. For years, wearables meant log-on passive data, steps, sleep, heart rate. That era, it's definitively over.
Oh, it truly is. What we're
hmm
seeing now, based on the latest research compiled for us, is this real acceleration toward, well, you could call it active human-computer integration.
Hmm.
These devices aren't just measuring anymore. They're interpreting neurological intent. They're overlaying digital reality with super relevant data and functioning as really essential AI-native extensions of us. It's a huge shift.
Yeah, from just an accessory to something almost necessary.
Exactly.
We're calling this week's theme Strapped In, and it signifies exactly that shift. Today, we've got a clear mission for you, the learner. We're going to unpack three crucial areas where these trends are converging and, frankly, accelerating. First up, the new platform wars for spatial computing. It's really a battle for your face, defined by two vastly different market ideas. Second, we'll dive into the incredible breakthroughs in restoring human senses and function using AI and some really advanced haptics. We're talking about literally redefining what a human body can do with technology.
And finally, and this is critical, we have to tackle the societal headwinds. As technology gets this personal, the risks around privacy, social acceptance, ethics, particularly around neural data, they just shoot up exponentially. It's a really high-stakes moment. The tech is shifting from just computational to something fundamentally physiological.
Okay, let's jump straight into that visible front line, the face. The wearable tech landscape saw two massive unveilings recently, and what's fascinating, according to the information we reviewed, is how the tech is forcing the industry to choose between two fundamentally different philosophies. Let's call them the platform versus the portal.
Right, and this strategic divergence isn't just about, competing products. It's probably going to define the next decade of spatial computing and how we interact with AI. On one side, you've got the platform strategy. Think Samsung, Google, Qualcomm working together. That led to the launch of the Galaxy XR headset. This is explicitly designed as an open ecosystem challenge to those more vertically integrated walled gardens we see elsewhere.
Ah, so it's kind of the Android mobile strategy all over again, but for spatial computing. Betting on scale, developer freedom, that kind of thing.
Precisely. The core goal seems multifaceted. They want to attract a broad developer base right away, prevent platform fragmentation, and make sure things work together by supporting standards like OpenXR and WebXR. It's a classic long-term play, really. Growth fueled by hardware scale and lots of different developers.
Okay, but there's a catch, right? The price.
Yes, there's a significant strategic detail here, the price. The Galaxy XR is priced high. We're talking $1,799.99 USD.
Wow. Okay, so that price point immediately tells you they're probably not aiming for the average person buying like their first VR headset instead of a game console. Why so high? Is it just the cost of the parts, or is that a deliberate positioning choice?
All the signs point towards a deliberate, maybe enterprise first, or perhaps a prosumer strategy. The high cost reflects sophisticated components, sure advanced optics, powerful custom chips from Qualcomm, specialized eye tracking hardware. But it also signals market intent. Pricing it higher suggests the immediate return on investment, the ROI, will likely come from businesses and professionals who can use it right away for high-value tasks.
Like what, 3D modeling? Remote work?
Exactly. 3D modeling, remote collaboration, specialized training, they seem to be looking for early adopters who need a serious work tool, not just a consumer gadget. Establish the platform's utility first,
Yeah.
then maybe try to hit mass scale later.
Okay, now let's contrast that platform strategy with the completely different philosophy from Alibaba, the portal strategy with their Quark AI glasses. This isn't trying to be a whole new operating system, is it?
No, not at all. The portal strategy is fundamentally different. It's a proprietary gateway.
Yeah.
And importantly, it's significantly cheaper, around $660 USD. And its focus, almost entirely on very specific utility and commerce within Alibaba's existing massive digital empire.
Right. The intent here seems key. A lot of early smart glasses were about, recording your life, social media. But Alibaba seems to be positioning the Quark AI glasses strictly as a productivity tool, deeply tied into Alipay, Taobao, their maps.
Exactly. It's not trying to build a new world. It's trying to deepen engagement and transaction volume within the world they already have. Think of it as a specialized lens for commerce and interaction. Users are meant to use it for instant payments with Alipay, linking to products on Taobao, getting directions via AMAP. It's positioned as a high-utility accessory to make existing digital stuff easier, faster, maximize transaction efficiency.
So it's not really trying to replace your phone or your computer.
Not at all. It sets up this fascinating competitive dynamic. The platform betting on openness and eventual huge scale versus the portal getting on its own ecosystem lock-in and immediate focused usefulness.
Interesting. But okay, regardless of platform or portal, the second you put a display right in front of someone's eyes and ask them to interact in 3D space, the old rules just break down, right? You can't just slap a desktop interface onto that.
Absolutely not. The hardware itself demands entirely new ways to interact. Our research team looked at extensive documentation studying how users actually behave in spatial computing environments, for instance, using complex 3D content creation systems. And the conclusion is pretty definitive. Interaction logic in XR is fundamentally different from the 2D desktop world most of us grew up with.
What did those studies find? Why do the old desktop metaphors fail so badly when you move into 3D?
Well, the main insight seems to be cognitive load. In 2D, we rely heavily on high-precision inputs like a mouse, right? In 3D, that same level of precision can actually be counterproductive, mentally taxing. The studies confirm that multimodal interaction is absolutely key. Users feel constrained, unnatural, if they're stuck with just one input method. We need different inputs optimized for different tasks to make it feel, well, natural.
Okay, so break down those optimized ways to interact for us.
Certainly. The research showed 3 clear winners, each really good for a different type of task. First, gaze tracking. Turns out it's highly effective for selecting objects.
Just look at it to pick it.
Pretty much. If you want to grab something, you just look at it. It's low effort, precise enough for selection, and it just intuitively aligns with how humans naturally indicate interest or intent.
But I imagine staring at something for a long time could get tiring or maybe awkward. You probably don't want to move things around just by staring.
Correct. And that's why gestures were found to be most intuitive and effective for spatial operations, moving, rotating, scaling objects in that 3D space. These are the physical actions that correspond naturally to spatial changes. A subtle hand movement feels much more natural for shifting a virtual screen than trying to do it precisely with gaze tracking.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about tasks that are more conceptual? Not just placing things, but telling the system what you want.
That's where voice input really shines. The research indicates it's most effective for handling those conceptual commands, especially when you're telling an underlying AI to generate or modify something complex. Think about instructing the system. I want a castle modeled in the Renaissance style, or maybe change the atmosphere to a stormy night scene. Voice captures that abstract command beautifully.
So, gaze selects, gestures manipulate spatially, and voice handles the big ideas.
Exactly. Letting these methods work together according to their strengths makes the whole experience more efficient and, honestly, more immersive.
And this efficiency, this isn't just about feeling cool, it translates directly into serious money when you apply it to the enterprise market, which, as you said, these new headsets are aggressively targeting for clear ROI.
Oh, the return on investment potential is massive. Consider the example highlighted in the research. Samsung partnering with Samsung Heavy Industries to use the Galaxy XR for virtual shipbuilding training.
Shipbuilding. Okay, I can see that. Complex, potentially dangerous.
Incredibly complex, potentially dangerous, and involves huge capital investment. If a mistake happens during physical training, the cost is just astronomical.
So how does strapping on an XR headset change that training process fundamentally?
Well, it achieves 3 key things all at once: safety, repeatability, and efficiency. Workers can practice really intricate procedures like welding complex joints or navigating safety protocols in tight spaces in a completely safe virtual environment. They can fail, learn, repeat, all without any physical consequence. Plus, the XR environment allows for overlaying contextual data, schematics, even expert remote guidance right into their field of view.
So an engineer miles away could literally draw on the trainee's virtual view.
Precisely. Draw schematics, point things out. This dramatically improves both productivity and safety outcomes. The research suggests that for these high-risk, high-cost industries, the ROI on these devices could be almost immediate, just through reducing errors and getting workers up to speed faster.
That shipbuilding example is a perfect illustration of how this tech is moving beyond just being a novel into core utility. But now, let's shift gears a bit. Let's turn to our second major area of convergence. Moving from the displays we see to the invisible systems that interface directly with our senses, maybe even our thoughts. This is the deepest integration restoring senses and function, where technology becomes fundamentally integrated with the body.
Yeah, this is where the line between technology and biology gets really blurry. And the advances seem to be coming from 2 complementary directions: direct neural access and sensory restoration.
Okay, let's start with the BCI frontier. Brain-computer interfaces. It feels like neurotechnology is moving towards clinical reality and maybe even consumer reality faster than ever before.
The progress is undeniable. And it's happening on parallel tracks, really. On one hand, you have the highly invasive restoration efforts. Think Neuralink and the recent announcement of a clinical trial for thought-to-text implant. The goal there is just monumental. Restoring the fundamental human ability to speak, to communicate, for people with severe paralysis. That's moving beyond augmentation to actually restoring lost function. But it requires direct surgical access to the brain, highest possible stakes.
Right. And then on the non-invasive side, we're seeing breakthroughs that promise to make continuous neural monitoring maybe more socially acceptable and incredibly discreet. I'm thinking of that non-invasive Ear-EEG prototype that came out of a collaboration involving Samsung and Hanyang University.
Yes, this looks like a highly viable path for more mainstream continuous neural monitoring. The device is designed to be comfortable, discreet, fitting in or behind the ear. It removes that obvious hardware barrier that usually keeps neurotech stuck in the lab or hospital. The fact that the research confirms a socially acceptable continuous form of monitoring is possible, that's foundational.
But how much information can you really get from just two little electrodes near the ear? Does that data stream even compare to what you'd get from a full clinical EEG cap?
That's the crucial insight from the research. While it's certainly not as comprehensive as a big clinical array, the data stream proved rich enough for complex, specific cognitive state analysis. A sophisticated model they call Deep AtNet demonstrated that you can build a pretty robust mental stress detector using just those two channels of ear-EEG recordings. It manages to isolate the neural signatures of stress and attention with high accuracy. So it suggests that even minimalist, continuous monitoring can give you actionable, personalized insights.
Okay, so we have sensors collecting the raw data, brainwaves, heart rate, activity logs, all this messy stuff. But what turns that massive continuous stream of biometric and neural info into something genuinely useful for the person wearing it? That sounds like where AI comes in, specifically large language models, LLMs.
The LLMs are absolutely the sophisticated intelligence layer that closes the loop. They transform that raw data to dialogue, as the research puts it. Historically, wearables often failed because they just threw numbers at you, right? Users get overwhelmed with graphs and stats that don't actually tell them what to do next. LLMs can potentially solve this by interpreting that continuous stream sleep metrics, stress signatures from the ear-EEG, activity levels, and correlating it not just with itself, but with the user's broader context. Think calendar events, known environmental factors, past behavioral patterns.
This sounds like the blueprint for what the research team calls the digital twin.
It really is the convergence point. The goal is to create this dynamic, AI-powered model of an individual's complete physical and mental state, constantly updated in real time by all these sensors. This digital twin allows for proactive, predictive wellness interventions. Instead of just recording that you were stressed yesterday, the system could potentially predict peak stress moments before they even happen.
Okay, give us a practical example. How would this proactive intervention actually work in the real world based on what the researchers found?
Right, let's stick with the Ear-EEG example. If the device detects rising neural activity associated with stress, maybe during a tough meeting that's on your calendar, the LLM-powered system could reference your past reactions, your schedule, and proactively intervene. It might suggest, maybe via a subtle buzz on your watch or a notification in your XR glasses, a personalized intervention. Perhaps a specific brief breathing exercise it knows works for you, a subtle suggestion to shift posture, or even a prompt to take a very short break based on your pre-programmed coping strategies.
So it transforms the wearable from just a passive tracker of your life into an active kind of cognitive co-pilot, constantly optimizing your well-being.
That's the vision, yes,
Yeah.
an active co-pilot.
That deep integration is incredible, but it's not just about the brain, is it? Let's shift now from the neural interface to the body itself. Another huge integration challenge is restoring the sense of touch, or haptics, for people using prosthetic devices.
This is absolutely critical. The lack of natural sensory feedback is arguably the single biggest reason people abandon these devices. We saw data showing rejection rates for advanced prosthetic hands hitting up to 45% for kids. And the lack of natural haptic feedback, the ability to feel what they're grasping, is cited over and over as the main reason. So restoring that sophisticated sense of touch is paramount if we want these artificial limbs to truly become integrated, useful tools.
The research highlights a particularly impressive approach here, the B-Ionic glove system. It's a wearable, tactile feedback device for upper limb prosthetics. Let's dive into the mechanism. It seems to have three key parts, starting with how it senses pressure.
Right. The B-Ionic system starts with these soft sensor pads at the prosthetic fingertips. These aren't your typical rigid sensors. They actually contain a conductive fluid, could be salt water, or maybe a liquid metal like gallon stand housed within tiny silicone channels. When you apply pressure during a grasp, this fluid gets forced through those channels.
Okay, so pressure moves fluid. That's the input. How does that translate into computation? That sounds complex.
Well, the movement of that conductive fluid actually completes electrical circuits across embedded electrodes. This forms the basis of the system's computation, handled by what they call an electrofluidic control unit. It essentially functions as a soft matter computer, or SMC.
Wait, hang on. A computer made of fluid? That's wild. What does that actually let the prosthetic figure out?
It means the system can determine pretty sophisticated grasping conditions. For example, it can figure out if pressure is being applied on the thumb and the forefinger at the same time, or maybe if pressure is on the left finger or the right finger before it triggers any feedback. This ability to do localized, multi-finger logical analysis. It opens the door to performing complex, delicate tasks that need real coordination, like picking up an egg without crushing it or handling fragile equipment.
Okay, so we've sensed the pressure, computed the intent with this fluid computer. The final step is actuation. How does the user actually feel this complex touch information on the residual limb without just getting like a distracting buzz?
Right, the actuation is delivered using specialized materials called shape memory alloys, or SMAs. These are tiny, lightweight wires integrated into an armband worn on the residual limb. When an electrical signal comes from the SMC, the SMAs contract, and this produces subtle squeezing and skin-stretching sensations on the user's skin.
Ah, so instead of that buzzing, vibrating phone feel we're used to from standard haptics, this is more like a small, controlled pinch or stretch, trying to mimic how real skin shifts when you touch something.
Precisely. This SMA-based skin stretching method is highly preferred over traditional vibrotactile feedback for a few reasons. SMAs are lightweight, they're silent, and crucially, they generate a much more natural, effective touch sensation. Vibrotactile buzzing tends to be disruptive because it targets large areas, giving you a general sense of vibration. Skin stretching, though, activates specific mechanoreceptors, like Ruffini endings, that process localized force information more naturally. It's a targeted, less intrusive way to send information.
That makes perfect sense. The feedback is designed to be a more intuitive channel. Did the user studies confirm people could actually interpret these subtle signals effectively?
They did, but with a really important insight for designing these systems going forward. When human subjects were tested, they were significantly more accurate at distinguishing the location of the stimulation, hitting about 81% correct responses, than they were at distinguishing the strength or power level. Accuracy there dropped to around 66% across 3 different power levels.
So the key takeaway for engineers isn't necessarily tell the user how hard they're pressing, but more like tell them exactly where they're making contact on this part of the finger.
Exactly. It strongly suggests that spatial mapping is a much more effective and intuitive way to relay haptic information back to the user than trying to convey precise force levels, especially if you can make the stimulation sites in the residual limb distinct enough. It really shifts the design priority from analog force feedback to precise spatial indication.
Interesting. Now, before we move on from deep integration, we should briefly touch on another aspect, just the physical fit and comfort. A residual limb can change volume during the day, right? Swelling, muscle activity. That can make a standard hard prosthetic socket really uncomfortable or poorly fitted.
Yeah, that's integration right down at the material science level. The information we reviewed noted parallel research focusing on adaptive materials, specifically using auxetic structures, things like tiled auxetic cylinders, or tacks. Auxetics are these rare materials that actually expand perpendicular to an applied force, the opposite of how most materials behave when you squeeze them. The idea is that an auxetic structure in a prosthetic socket could actively and automatically adapt to those fluctuations in limb volume.
So it would maintain a better fit, reduce pressure points.
Exactly. Improve fit, potentially eliminate problems like deep tissue injury caused by improper pressure. It's really smart material design meeting biological needs.
That's incredible. So we're integrating at the material level, the neural level, the cognitive level, all at the same time. This complex, constant integration makes the tech incredibly powerful, but it also comes at a massive potential cost, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which brings us neatly to the ethical and social headwinds in our final segment.
Absolutely. As these devices become more powerful, more deeply woven into our lives and our bodies, the stakes around privacy and ethics just skyrocket.
Let's start with the most visible concern, driven largely by those face-worn devices, privacy in public, these discrete AI glasses. They kind of normalize constant unconsented recording of people in public, maybe even in private spaces. It feels like a societal reckoning just waiting to happen because the tech has run so far ahead of our social norms.
The core tension is right there. The tech is designed to be subtle, always on, but that very subtlety destroys the reasonable expectation of privacy for bystanders. And the current industry attempt to consent, like a tiny little LED light, it's widely seen as insufficient for the kind of explicit, informed consent required by serious regulations like GDPR. That little light, easily missed, especially in a busy place. It makes notice ineffective and real consent basically impossible.
And the threat isn't just theoretical surveillance for ads anymore, is it? The information our team compiled highlighted a proof of concept that demonstrates a really immediate, dangerous capability. It was called IXRA. This sounds genuinely chilling.
It really should concern everyone. The IXRA project basically showed that by combining a live, high-res video stream from smart glasses with publicly available facial recognition services and data broker tools, you could identify strangers on the street in real time. And crucially, you could then pull up sensitive personal data linked to that, identity names, maybe past jobs, even potentially home addresses.
So these discrete glasses essentially become a real-time wearable doxing machine. If someone wanted to cause harm or stalk someone, the barrier to entry just plummeted.
Absolutely. And it chips away at that crucial social anonymity we often rely on in public. Beyond that active doxing threat, there's this systemic issue of passive data exploitation for training commercial AI. The research highlights this industry practice of using images and videos of non-consenting bystanders just incidentally captured while the wearer is recording something else as raw data. This data then gets fed into commercial AI models to train and refine them.
So the public effectively becomes an unpaid, non-consenting data source just by, existing near someone wearing smart glasses.
That's the implication, yes.
Okay, if face-worn devices are the frontier of visual and public privacy, then BCI's brain-computer interfaces represent the last frontier, the ethics of neural access. This has got to be the most sensitive data we possess.
Oh, absolutely. Neural data is exponentially more sensitive than any other biometric data we have, more than fingerprints, even more than genetic information. It reveals intentions, emotions, cognitive states, even the very beginnings of thought processes. The potential for misuse is profound, and the research really calls for immediate, serious discussion about safeguards.
Specifically, we need to think about the threat of a cyber attack on one of these deeply integrated BCIs, what some are calling brain hacking.
Right. A successful cyber attack could lead to, well, at least two catastrophic outcomes. First, the unauthorized theft of raw neural data. Our innermost thoughts and intentions could literally be stolen. Second, and maybe even more disturbing, is the potential for manipulation. By feeding false signals back into the brain or into the connected control system, a hostile actor could theoretically interfere with the user's thoughts, maybe hijack control over a prosthetic limb, or influence decision-making processes run by the system.
The integrity of the individual's free will is directly at stake.
It absolutely is.
This screams for legal guardrails that just don't exist today, because our current laws were written for a world where thoughts couldn't be quantified and extracted like this.
Correct. The current legal framework is largely silent on the specific status of neural data. It often gets lumped in with other health data, but as we've said, it's vastly more sensitive. Fortunately, legislative concepts are starting to emerge. We're seeing proposed laws in places like Colorado and Minnesota trying to establish a legal right to mental privacy and cognitive liberty. These laws aim to specifically regulate how brain activity data is collected and used, and, crucially, to prevent interference with an individual's autonomous decision-making. They recognize this is a unique category needing special protection.
Okay, this seems like a good moment to remind everyone listening on YouTube. If you're finding this insightful, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Tomorrow Unveiled, and maybe consider hitting that new hype button. It helps us reach more viewers. And of course, turn on notifications so you never miss an update on the future.
And if you're listening on a podcast service like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we'd be incredibly grateful if you could leave us a rating and review for Tomorrow Unveiled. It genuinely helps new listeners find us.
Now, beyond the huge issues of privacy and ethics, there's a much simpler, though maybe equally critical, barrier to adoption we touched on earlier. Just basic social acceptability and usability in public.
Yeah, usability is completely tied to social acceptance.
Uh-huh.
The moment interacting with a device feels obtrusive or awkward or just draws unwanted attention, people will stop using it in public. And that kills mass adoption right there. User studies consistently confirm people are hesitant to adopt devices if they need loud voice commands or big, obvious mid-air gestures right in front of their face. Nobody wants to look like they're conducting an invisible orchestra in the middle of a coffee shop.
All right, so what's the consensus then on acceptable alternatives? How do people want to interact subtly?
The preference, according to the user studies we reviewed, is overwhelmingly for non-touch, non-handheld interaction, and specifically for gestures that are performed closer to the torso or are just very subtle rather than big movements out in front of the face. Smaller, more constrained movements seem key to maintaining that feeling of social comfort and reducing how much bystanders feel disturbed. The design has to minimize the perceived disruption to the social environment around the user.
That said, there was a fascinating exception noted in the research regarding social psychology, the assistive technology effect, or AT effect.
Yes, this is a really crucial finding. It highlights a kind of conditional acceptance. Observers judged the use of head-mounted devices as more socially acceptable if the device was clearly being used to help a person with a disability, or maybe to perform a required work task. If the technology is perceived as assistive or necessary for function, the social judgment changes pretty dramatically. This means designers need to be incredibly sensitive to context.
So the same device used for virtual welding inspection in a factory might be totally fine.
Right, likely accepted.
But the exact same interaction used to scroll through social media in a restaurant could generate really negative reactions.
Exactly. Context is everything for social acceptance.
We love hearing your thoughts on this. Whether you're on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, leave a comment and let us know what you think about the future of wearable tech and brain-computer interfaces. Should the laws catch up before the technology gets released widely, what are your concerns?
We've covered some massive ground today, huh? From platform wars all the way to brain hacking and restoring the sense of touch. If we try to synthesize everything, the industry seems to be accelerating along two interconnected paths that really define this strapped-in future.
Okay, first, that platform war for spatial computing is officially on. It pits the open, scaling ecosystem model, think Samsung, Google's Android XR Alliance, against that utility-focused proprietary portal model like Alibaba's. This fight is going to dictate hardware design, developer economics, consumer choice for probably the next decade. It'll determine if spatial computing becomes an open environment or just a series of corporate gateways. Second, there's the deep integration of AI into the body for wellness and restoration. Breakthroughs in discrete, non-invasive BCIs like that Ear-EEG, combined with the powerful analytical intelligence of LLMs. They're pushing us rapidly toward a real paradigm shift.
And that convergence leads directly to that vision of the digital twin we talked about. This isn't really science fiction anymore, is it? It's this idea of a hyper-personalized, predictive model of an individual that allows for proactive health and cognitive interventions. It shifts our focus from reactive treatment, dealing with problems after they happen, to proactive optimization of our well-being. That seems like the ultimate utility of the deeply integrated wearable. And that leads us directly to our final provocative thought for today. Something for you to really mull over. The research we looked at clearly shows that as these devices get more powerful, more personal, the long-term success of this entire strapped-in future. It depends not really on technological capability. We clearly can build these systems, from fluid computers to stress detectors, but on one singular thing: trust. The next major bottleneck isn't processing speed or battery life. It's the industry's ability to securely and ethically handle our most intimate data, including our thoughts, our senses, our real-time cognitive state. Without that trust, adoption will stall no matter how amazing the technology might seem.
Until next time on Tomorrow Unveiled, stay strapped in.